Bodhicharya Kent is pleased to share another teaching from Tsering Paldron, entitled Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. This talk will explore what spiritual materialism is, so that we can more easily avoid being snared in its traps along the path, as well as look at a genuine and authentic spiritual approach to life that brings deep lasting benefit to ourselves and others. Originally recorded at Bodhicharya Kent, November 2018. Please sit comfortably and relax, as the teaching is about to commence.
Okay, so the title of the talk tonight comes from a book that was published in the early 70s and is a gathering of different talks and teachings by one of the first great Tibetan lamas to come to the West, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, who lived in England for a while and then traveled to the United States and lived there for the rest of his life. And through his experience with the Western culture and mainly the hippies culture, because was the generation, was the time, he came out with this idea or this phrasing of spiritual materialism, and as a warning for a sort of distorted way to envision the practice of Buddhism or Dharma, as we call it. I read the book long time ago, and I didn't read it again since then. So anyway, I will not talk about what the book says, and for that you can read the book. It's there, I think. So there's no need for me to go through this. But it's like Cesare said. Often when I come here, he always finds sort of challenging topics for me, and I like that. So it's okay. So what are we talking about when we say spiritual materialism? I think two things come to my mind, and I'll start by one of them, which is there might be the fact that in Buddhism everything, or we listen quite often people saying that actually Buddhism is about how to transcend suffering and finding some lasting happiness. This can be a little misleading in the sense that we might, it sort of goes in the same direction, or apparently goes in the same direction as some other thoughts or currents or schools or whatever in the Western culture nowadays. What we might call, or called in some time ago, New Age things, and this idea of finding happiness, and just trying to have nice experiences and things like this. So what I mean by a little misleading is that the idea of, as I said, it's not like finding happiness, it's transcending a certain condition. The purpose of Buddhism is not so much about finding or enjoying only the good parts of life, like, enjoying only the pleasure and the nice things, and trying to find all the pleasant conditions, or even not external only, but trying to find pleasure within ourselves, or training ourselves to be happy, or to see, the half full glass instead of the half empty, something like that. Which it's okay. It's not to say that we shouldn't do that, but just to say that according to the teachings of the Buddha, that's not what we are aiming at. So when we speak about, in Buddhism, when we say transcending, it's just to find the Buddha nature, or to find the enlightened state of mind in which happiness and suffering as opposed things, feelings, and as we experience them, are no longer present. We have come to a state where happiness and suffering as we know them don't get a hold on us anymore. There is something else that arises, a state of, we could say, not permanent but stable joy and awareness, and something that is totally transcending our ordinary experience of the world for now. This doesn't mean we are not capable of experiencing it, but it's not our experience right now. So it's not as much, or it's not like it might sound like a way or a method to just overcome suffering or extinguish suffering as an opposing force to happiness or something like this, but a way to, through happiness and suffering, not denying one or trying to pursue just one of them, through the experience of all these ups and downs in life, and through the cultivation of different states of awareness and different states of wisdom and compassion, and the whole process of transforming our own mind, we get to a point where there is this state that really transcends, goes beyond the definition of suffering and happiness as we know them. And so when I say it is a bit misleading, is that because it's constantly, in Buddhism we constantly hear this word happiness or the word suffering, quite often the teachings, at least in Tibetan Buddhism tradition, quite often teachings start the teacher saying, all beings want happiness, but they don't know how to get it, so they often do the actions or commit the actions that bring them suffering. And statements like this that always come up in the teachings may give us the wrong impression that Buddhists are actually running after, or denying suffering and running after happiness, and that's what Buddhism is all about. So, so in one sense, it is, I think, important. There is even one great teacher, more contemporary. Chogyam Trungpa died in the 80s. He was still quite young, but he passed away at that time. But there is now, from the new generation, another great teacher called Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, who wrote a few years ago, a book which I think it's the sort of the hair, it's the continuation of the cutting through spiritual materialism in a more up-to-date form, which is not for happiness, it's called. And what he means to say, and he says that in the book, if you wish for pleasure and enjoyment and happiness, don't become a Buddhist, go for a massage. That will be much more efficient, So if that's what you want, certainly don't become a Buddhist, because the Buddhist path is not all about, it's not all about pleasure and happiness and having a good time. When we come across because it is a method for ourselves to work upon our emotions, to work upon our problems actually, and face them, and not only ours. Sometimes it also, as if we take the approach of the more Mahayana or altruistic version of Buddhism, we are supposed to be dealing with our problems and also help others deal with theirs. So it's not really something that we would, it's not like a cruise or something. It's something a little bit deeper, and sometimes it takes a lot of courage it's like a deep therapy in one sense, except that we have almost similar tools also. So it will probably bring about some issues in ourselves. We will be confronted with difficult things, with patterns of which we are not aware and that keep us in the same loop, let's say. Experiences that come up again and again and that we don't understand are just our own making, and we tend to think that this is everybody else's fault, or the society, or our colleagues, or any kind of situations, external situations. And Buddhism is always pointing to the fact that even if it apparently has something to do with outer circumstances, ultimately we really have to check ourselves again and again, because when there's a problem, it's not just one way. We are part of the problem, always. I'm not meaning to say that it is entirely our creation, necessarily. Of course, other people also play their part, but we are part of the problem. So if we are able to have a hard look at our part and make some changes in the way we react towards any kind of situation, that will probably help solve the situation, and also will teach us something that we otherwise may have not been able to see. I think one very good sign that we are on the right direction is when we start asking questions, like, for instance, let's say this situation keeps happening to me. It happened to me, let's say it's a work situation, or something I don't get along with my colleagues, for instance. They always envy me. And after a few years and after a few jobs, we say, okay, this happened at that place, this happened 2-3 years again in another place, this happened to me, now it's happening to me again. So, am I part of the problem? Because sometimes it takes a few experiences, a few similar experiences for us to sort of have this insight. Maybe it's me who is creating this, or maybe I'm part of the problem. Maybe I do something that I can't see, and it's creating this reaction from people around me. So it's not running away from the problems. It's not trying to just see everything through pink glasses or something like this. We might think that trying to find happiness and choosing. Now there's another expression, very very modern and mainstream, which is happiness is a choice. So we think it's just a matter of I push a button, switch, and then I see happiness everywhere, and I feel that there is this potential for happiness, and it's entirely my choice. I just have to choose. It's not false, but it's not true also, because it is a choice, but it's not the choice that I might be able to do, because I have these patterns, because I have these habits, because there are lots of conditions, causes and conditions. So it's not just one day I decide, now I'm going to be happy, and I switch to happiness. It's not as simple as that. There's lots of conditions, and there's lots of habits that I will have to change, and I will have to see things in a much more clear way, and it takes time. So when we start understanding, one of the basics of Buddhism is the fact that we stop blaming others, and we also stop blaming ourselves. That's also something very important, because sometimes people get this idea when we say, in Buddhism we stop blaming others, then they say, okay, it's entirely my fault. It's not a matter of fault, and it's not to say that we should blame ourselves. There is no one to blame. But we have to understand it's not blame, it's not guilt, it's responsibility. It's like we have been living in automatic pilot. And because we are not aware of what we say, what we think, and what we do, then lots of things are happening and we can't connect the dots. We can't see that those things that are happening, apparently coming from outside, are actually a reaction or a consequence of our own doing. But because we are not even aware of what we are doing and what we are saying, and in which sometimes it's not exactly the words, but how we said it, at what time, at what moment, and all of these things, because we are not aware of that, we can't see the connection between the way we behave, whether it's verbally or physically or even mentally, because it is a frame of mind, and from that frame of mind or from that attitude, all the other actions spring forth. It's if I'm angry with someone, then I will probably say harsh words and do harsh things. So it all begins in the mind. But if we are not aware of how we feel, of our attitude, then these things, these reactions that we are creating around us, don't strike us as being the result of our own understanding, of our own feelings, of our own doings. And so, not connecting the dots make us continue to go on and on and on in this form of automatic pilot, always blaming circumstances and people, and not realizing that of course they are reacting, of course they are having their own behavior, but in part that situation is also our responsibility. And that's one of the first crucial understandings that any Buddhist should have. It is partly my making, it's partly my responsibility, and in order to change something, I have to start by acknowledging, owning my own responsibility over my own actions. If I don't do that, I will never be able to change anything. Because I'm sure all of you have tried, I also have tried, to change other people. Have you ever managed? Very difficult. I mean, impossible. Sometimes it works, but we shouldn't count too much on that. So if we don't acknowledge our own responsibility in all the situations in life, we are powerless. Because changing the world is not going to happen. And changing people around us is not going to happen. So if we are counting on that changing in order for us to be happy or in order for us to be in peace, this is not very promising. It's not going to happen anytime soon. So the only way for us to really start changing something is by changing ourselves. And so that's why I'm saying that this is the crucial moment, this is the crucial understanding that anyone, I mean not even a Buddhist, anyone, but if you're starting in the Buddhist path and you're listening to Buddhist teachings and you're willing to change something or to engage into something, some sort of spiritual work, or even therapy, we have to understand that even though it is not entirely our responsibility, even though other people commit mistakes, that's for sure, they do mistakes, they do wrong things, but, at the end of the day, we can't help they doing mistakes. We can change them, but we can change ourselves, we can change the way we react to those mistakes, and we can also protect ourselves and not be in their way, in a sense, not be vulnerable to the wrongdoing of other people. That's also something, you know. So, because when it happens, when someone does us wrong, it is also because somehow we made ourselves vulnerable to that. So we have to, there's lots of things to learn, actually, but it's not a path where we are invited to run away or to avoid suffering and just follow happiness. It is a path where we are encouraged to face both in life, both suffering and both happiness, and to work with our mind and to work with our actions and to work with our words and our emotions and everything in order to make sense, in order to transform, in order to own our own reactions and understand our responsibility. And from there, then we can start working. And this is quite the opposite of many other, or the general, or even the general way people look at life. There is this tendency for us, of course, it's the easiest. I'm not saying it's wrong, or I'm not saying it's morally wrong or anything like that. We have this tendency to always blame others, external circumstances and things like this, because it's also sort of quicker and easier, you know, than just have this hard look on ourselves and say, how have I participated in this? What is my part, what is my share of responsibility in whatever is happening to me? And this is the first basic understanding, I think, that one has to have in order to be sure, or at least relatively sure, to be on the right frame of mind to practice or to start practicing Buddhism. It's just this ownership of our own responsibility. It's up to us, in a sense. And when we, through meditation and through mind training and through all the methods that Buddhism gives us, when we start working on ourselves, then things start changing. Actually, the world we see, the world we relate to, starts changing. I'm not saying that this will influence elections or Brexit or, you know, I'm not saying to that extent. It might, why not? It might. But I'm not going that far. But what I mean is the world we perceive, our world, the world that is, you know, our daily experience, our friends, our colleagues, our loved ones, you know, people around us, and our relationship to them starts changing because we have changed ourselves. But this only can come through acknowledging and accepting our responsibility in whatever we are doing, you know. And from this knowledge, then happiness and sorrow, happiness and suffering become teachers, both. Actually, suffering possibly even more so. We tend to, you know, be a bit careless when happiness comes. You know, careless in this sense. It's pleasant. Why should I worry? You know, there's nothing to worry about when some pleasant experience comes. The only worry we might have at some point is this going to be finished soon? That's the only worry we might have. But so we tend to be a little careless when we are going through a smooth phase and everything is according to our wishes. But, so that's why when things go wrong or when things are harsh, when we are confronted with not being able to accomplish our wishes, or everything that we wished for is destroyed, or, you know, this kind of rough patches in our lives, and sometimes they come in kits, you know, packets. It's not only one thing. Normally it is the gathering of many things. I lost my job, I lost my boyfriend, you know, my dog died, and everything happened sort of in the same year or within a few months. And those rough patches, these tough moments, actually are sometimes a much better teacher, because then we can't be careless. We can't just pretend that we are still happy. We can't just pretend that nothing is really happening, and we can just go around and have another piece of cake and everything will be all right. It won't work like this because it's too hard. And then it sort of pushes us. It makes us, we are almost obliged to really work with ourselves, use the tools. So in Buddhism, from my own experience anyway, and not even just because the teachings say so, but in my own experience, I found that the moments in my life where the biggest transformation happened were the tough moments. Sometimes it's not exactly while it's being tough, but it's afterwards. Just having to deal with the difficulties, having to deal with the hardships, makes us more mature, makes us more open also to realize that we are not alone, and many other people are suffering. There was once one lady who came to a workshop in Portugal, and we were discussing this tendency that we all have when something goes wrong, and we have this question popping in our mind, why me? Why does this happen to me? What have I done wrong, or why me? And she said this, I thought it was so nice. She said, whenever this question pops in my mind, I always tend to ask myself, why not me? Why not me? What have I done so special that I wouldn't be touched by the same things that make other people's lives miserable, divorce or sickness or, economical problems or whatever. Why not me? I'm no one special. I'm just a human being like everybody else. And so if other people have to face these problems, so must I. There's nothing special about that. So, it's not to say, and sometimes people get this impression that because we find these sentences that the Buddha said, something like, everything is suffering, or suffering is everywhere, samsara is suffering, or things like this, we also might get the impression that Buddhism is very pessimistic, or something like that. But that's not the thing. The thing is, it is a tool, it is a method for us to go through life in its wholeness. It's not just half, just the good stuff, and try to push away the bad stuff, or sweep it under the carpet or something like this. It's not like that. It is a willingness to work with everything and to be brave enough to face difficulties. And that's where it starts to become interesting, because once we have managed to deal with difficult stuff and gracefully and even with some sort of positive outcome, slowly, experience after experience, we get a sort of confidence that starts building up. And this confidence is probably one of the most important and also not so difficult achievements that the practice of Buddhism might bring to someone. It's the sort of confidence to say, okay, I am now, I won't say my age, I'm now, and I've been through a few things in my life. I'm still here. I survived all of them. I'm not bitter. I'm not an old angry woman. So I get this little confidence that, come what may, I think I might be able to deal with it. So it's not, that, you see, it's not at all this idea that, you know, I have been accumulating a lot of positive karma, so I'm sure nothing bad will happen to me, I won't die, or I won't have a serious illness, or anything like this. This is totally unrealistic. You know, the Buddha died, and he okay, at a very advanced age for the time, especially 80 years at the time was really very advanced age, but he died eventually someday, and of course something failed in his body. He didn't die full of health, probably there was some problem, otherwise he wouldn't have died. And we can see teachers and realized beings, everybody dies, so this will also happen to us. There is no guarantee that we won't have a serious or painful or difficult or degenerative sickness or illness, but so that's not the kind of certainty that we might develop. That's not it. It's not the certainty that everything is going to be perfectly okay and I will die healthy at the age of 100. That's not the idea. But we get the confidence. We get the confidence that whatever happens, we will survive. We will survive emotionally, I mean. Of course that we won't survive, but you know, we will survive in this sense. I will be able, even if it's not easy, but I will be able to make the most out of it, not to fall into a bitterness, or not to fall into becoming an angry person, or resentment, all these things. And this can only happen because we have previously in our lives be able to face difficulties with a positive attitude, with a sort of willingness to engage in the difficult part. Not because, you know, I just turned away because it stinks, you know, and I don't want to deal with this. This won't bring us any more happiness, on the contrary, because this will make us afraid of suffering. So we'll be suffering even before we suffer. We'll be in a constant anguish that suffering might come our way. So the way to this certainty, perhaps not yet the transcendence of happiness and suffering, but at least this very important sort of peace of mind, because this certainty or this confidence gives us peace of mind. Gives us the peace of mind to tell ourselves, I don't need to be anguished about what might come or what might happen. First of all, when it happens, then we will see, because it doesn't really help by me now starting projecting that this or that might help. So we will see when it comes, and also I get this sort of confidence, this sort of peaceful feeling that when it comes and when I will have to face it, because I will have to face it, whatever comes, then I'm pretty sure that after all that I've been through in this life, I will be able to face it with grace, and you know, and make the most out of it, and go through it as yet another teaching or another experience, as yet another experience that will make me more mature, that will bring this result that I'm aiming for closer and closer to myself. So the Buddhist path it really goes almost the opposite way of this idea that we should sort of, it is our, even sometimes in our modern society, we get even this impression, or young people sometimes have this impression because they have, you know, we are fortunate generations. We have been enjoying a degree of comfort never experienced before in humankind, you know, heating, hot water, you know, all this sort, just, you know, you just have to turn a little tab and everything comes as you wish. This was not like that even 50 years ago for many people in Europe, for instance. So we have been enjoying all these comforts, and the younger generations even more so. People who lived through the war, for instance, or came just after, still had an idea that things can go tough. But, generations that came long after that, we don't have that feeling. So sometimes we get this impression that, it is our right to be happy. And if we are not, maybe we should sue someone, or, the government, or, someone is to blame if we are not as happy as someone promised us. Nobody promised that, but anyway, we think there is a sort of implicit promise in the fact that we are born and became humans, and then we are supposed to be having happiness. Well, that's not the case, I'm afraid to say. Breaking news, it's not the case. And the teachings of the Buddha started actually by pointing out that suffering is a very hard reality, something that is potentially always present, because even the things that make us happy can make us suffer when we lose them, for instance, or when we have too much of them also, too much of a good thing, not necessarily divine, can be a problem, can be a suffering. And so in this sense, the Buddhist path is really not the same thing, or the same, it goes in a quite opposite direction somehow than the New Age idea of, happiness is a choice. Not false. It's not entirely false, but it's not as simple as that. So this is one of the aspects, and of what came to my mind with this title, this idea that can be misleading from this modern perspective of happiness and suffering in our society, and a very dualistic way. There is, I think, even maybe in Europe it's a bit different, but I think in the United States, in America, people even feel bad and feel almost guilty if they're not happy all the time. It has become a new form of stress. So I'm not happy. Oh my God, there's something wrong with me. I should be happy. So they have been doing studies about these things, and got to the conclusion that this idea that if I'm not happy, I'm not normal, or if I'm not happy, something is wrong with me, became another form of stress and another form of unhappiness. I'm unhappy because I'm not happy. Something like that. So the Buddhist path goes really in a very different direction, and it teaches us, if we want to use it, we can. The Buddhist path is something. It's not something. It's not like a club or something that we join and then get the benefits. We get a little card, gives us reduction in the suffering. We have these promotions. 1 week of happiness, 50%, 50% off. It's not something like that. The Buddhist path is something. It's a method, but it only can work if we apply it. So it's not like a quick fix. Also, more and more we tend to look for all of us. Something that will work instantaneously. We get the tablet and then no more pain in 5 minutes. Buddhist path is not like that. It is something that we have to exert ourselves. That's why there will never be too many Buddhists in the world because it takes effort, and it is not so popular as other forms, other promises. There's full of, if you search in the internet, my goodness, there are thousands of offers of getting happiness in this thing about manifestation, and this movie The Secret, and it seems like you sit and visualize yourself thin and become thin. I've tried, it doesn't work. Maybe I can't visualize properly, but it hasn't worked with me. So all these quick fixes, it's very it's very popular and in our time, but that's not the Buddhist way. So in this sense, this is maybe a different form of spiritual materialism than Chogyam Trungpa was talking about, but I feel that this is also something very, in today's world, this is something very, very existent, and if you go through the internet or look up, you'll see lots of promises of people with meditation or visualization or hypnosis or I don't know what, promising that you'll find your soulmate in 2 weeks and things like this, and your life will never be the same, and things like this. So it is a totally different thing. I'm not saying you shouldn't try, by all means, try, but the Buddhist approach is an approach of it's a method for ourselves to work with ourselves, to work with the entire spectrum of our experience and not leaving things aside, just work with whatever comes, whatever the situation is, present situation is in our lives, work with that, and whatever our reaction to it, whatever our emotions towards whatever we are going through and experiencing, we work with that. We don't shy away. We are sort of brave enough to work with all these things. Because ultimately, if we start avoiding, if we want to avoid suffering, that's when we will also avoid happiness. By the same way, by sort of not wanting one, we won't have the other either, we won't have anything. We'll just be, like if we are already dead or something. Life comes in two flavors, and you can't just deny one and have the other. It's not possible. So, and actually, in order for us to really be able to experience true happiness, or something close to that, we also have to acknowledge and accept the bitter parts, the ones that are not so nice, apparently. And also understand that there is no experience in life that has only one aspect. So within something unpleasant, there are pleasant aspects, and within something pleasant, there are unpleasant aspects. So life there's lots of facets and there's lots of aspects, and by engaging in this diversity, we get to see life and experience life in a sort of 3D. You have a 3D experience. It's not so linear anymore. It's not like black and white. It has much more colors and shades and aspects and things to enjoy. If we're talking about tastes, well, yes, some people just like the sweet, but bitter is also nice. Might be nice, It quenches the thirst much more than sweet, for instance. Slightly bitter, not that much, but all tastes are nice if we are open to it. Okay, now another aspect of, and I think this aspect is closer to what Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche meant when he talked about spiritual materialism is more, maybe more difficult to perceive or sensitive perhaps. It is about the fact that whatever ideology or opinion or the feeling of belonging to a certain group or to have certain specific characteristics of ourselves, belonging to a country or a social class or whatever, can become a part of our identity. As in Buddhism we talk about ego, not in the same sense as, not necessarily in the same sense as in psychology, but ego as the identification of ourselves as being, like say, for me, being Portuguese, and and thinking that only Portuguese are nice people, or that only Portuguese olive oil is good, or this sort of thing, or my football club, or becoming obsessed about something, and becoming obsessed to the extent that if someone doesn't agree with me, or if I pretend or I say, the best olive oil in the world is the Portuguese one, then someone comes and says, no, it's the Italian one or the Spanish one, I become furious. Like if that person is insulting me personally, and then we can even go to the extent of starting to punch each other. It happens sometimes, maybe not because of olive oil, I don't know, but in other things, it becomes part of who we are, and then if it's denied, if someone doesn't agree with us, it's like a personal offense, you become like someone says, well, best olive oil I've ever tasted was Spanish. It feels like this person is depriving me of something, or it becomes a threat for my sense of identity, or for my sense of existence, So, and this identity, or this sense of identity that is very strong, and that is what is conditioning all our experience, because this sense of I am, it's what makes us be in a constant state of unease. It is because it is constant, and because it has gone for such a long time. Sometimes we don't recognize it, but actually, if we really deepen down for this, we already need some sort of experience of meditation and awareness, not only in meditation but in daily life. We might recognize that our mind, let's say, our ego, is always scanning whatever happens. By scanning, he's always trying to assess if whatever is happening is for him or against him, or neutral. If it is neutral, it's immediately dismissed. I don't care. I couldn't care less. Doesn't matter. But if let's say you are at work, and you overhear some talk, on the other end of the room someone is talking about something, and you sort of try to listen. You try to listen, and there's something is said about, you hear a word, like they're going to, how you say when they're going to fire people? Yeah. Apparently someone said that they're going to fire people, something like this. Immediately there's a sense of panic. What? Our ego is scanning scanning. Does this concern me somehow or not? You know? If it concerns me, is it a threat or is it something good? Am I going to get a promotion or am I going to get fired, or, you know? And of course this is a strong example in the sense that it's sort of normal that we get a bit panicked if we overhear something. Sometimes it probably is nothing like that, but we just overhear one word and then we make a whole drama out of that. But anyway, what I mean to say is that we are always in a sort of alert state of scanning, like what do you call that, radar. You know, we are always trying to find out if whatever is being said, whatever is happening around us is for us, or will it sort of enrich or be a cause of security or a sense of fulfillment for our sense of identity, or or the opposite is going to take something away from us, or take something, you know, that will deprive us from something that will change or impoverish the idea we have of ourselves. What I mean to say is, let's imagine that this example works well in Portugal, probably not as well here, but I will say it anyway. You know, the public transportation in Portugal is not as efficient as it is here. Well, at least in London, I don't know. yeah, can even be worse. So you should consider yourselves happy, fortunate. Yeah. Let's say someone who used, and in Portugal, having a big car is something important for most people. Having a good car, and you know, something that you can show to your friends and make them jealous. So let's say you go every day to work in your car, and then suddenly there is some problem with your economical life. You don't know, you lose your job, or not you lose your job, but you get some problem. There's some unexpected expenses or turnaround or whatever, and you can't use your car anymore. You have to go by public transportation to your job. That can become a problem for two reasons. Maybe one is that you have to find out what bus and what train and what tram you have to take, or in what station you have to get out, or things like this. But this sort of problem is very easily solved. You know, in 1 or 2 days you just download the timetables and the schedule, and you know that you have to change in this place and the other one. So after a week you may have figured it all out and know at what time you have to go out and at what time you arrive, and all of this is solved in 1 week. But your sense of the image that we have, the mental representation that we have created of ourselves as someone who is in the social class that has to come to work in its own car, this part may take months or even never be solved. We will remain with this sort of bitterness, because now a piece of what we consider to be ourselves, as the image or the representation we have created of ourselves, has been taken away from us. So the sort of the pragmatic and practical aspects are normally very easy to solve, or much easier anyway. It might need some organization, might need some changes, but if we take away the drama, it's very easy to solve, quite easy to solve. But the drama comes because we can't let go. We can't reorganize it takes much longer to create a new representation of ourselves, with which we will be comfortable, not with the sense of something has been taken and now I am more poor, or I have a impoverished sense of me because I have to go by bus or something like this. So that's what I mean. And if we sort of from this example, if we extend to other things, we can understand that most of the dramas in our life come from this, not the way we, the representation or the image of the idea we have of ourselves, and the difficulty to adjust to a new representation. Aging, for instance, is a problem. I am, and no, starting to wear glasses, have your implants, and aging is very expensive. Actually, becomes very expensive. But beyond that part, just accepting that there are things we can't do anymore, or we can't do the same way, and losing small bits of our. Of the personality, the person we were, or not the person we were, but the idea we had about ourselves is difficult. I have another good example, crazy example, of a friend of mine who has been a smoker for most of her life. And at some point, she was sick, she had some condition, I don't remember what, she's still quite young. And she didn't feel like smoking. I mean, it was disgusting. She stopped smoking, not because she had decided to stop smoking, but because it made her dizzy and nauseous and things like this. But then after a while, she couldn't cope with this new image of herself as a non-smoker. It was not the matter that she felt like smoking. She didn't feel like smoking. But she couldn't accept her as a non-smoker. So she forced herself to start smoking again. Amazing, huh? How far it goes, how deep it goes. And so she started smoking again, But what really struck me was that it was, she really had to go slow, get habituated to smoking again, like smoking half a cigarette and then smoking a whole cigarette. It's amazing, isn't it? But that's exactly how it functions. It's like this. It's not, as I said, the practical aspects are very straightforward. I don't feel like smoking. Why should I try? It is something that everybody says and everybody recognizes. It's bad for my health, it's bad for my pocket, it's expensive, it's just burning money actually somehow, and inhaling the smoke. What's the good thing about any of this? But, so instead of just, if we hold with the practical aspects, it's very easy and straightforward. But if we go to the drama part, this is part of who I am. If I stop smoking, who shall I be? Or who will I be if I don't smoke anymore? I will be one of those nerds who don't smoke? Oh, I don't want to look like them. I don't want to be associated with them. That people look at me and say, oh, she stopped smoking, oh my God, Things like this. That's how it works. So, because we live constantly in this mental representation, actually anything that crosses our way can become a new form of identification. So if I have an iPhone, I become an Apple person. And then I think that everybody that has an Android phone is a fool, or is, poor guy. Okay, iPhones are the best. Or, things like this. So Buddhism can also become something like that, can also become a new form of identification. I'm so much better than my neighbor because he's a Muslim and I am a Buddhist. And then it becomes, it's a bit like a football club or something like that. You miss completely the point. Because actually Buddhism and the practice of Buddhism is actually to dissolve all these things, to see through them, to just do what we have been doing here, and see through these things and understand that they're only, they don't really exist. They have no reality whatsoever besides our mental creation of a certain idea of ourselves that is always keeping our sense of identity with a certain density. What can I say? When even just losing an argument with someone makes us feel like a piece of ourselves has been taken away. Now I am less me than I was half an hour before. And then we run and eat another piece of cake, as I say. Well, now you know, because why visualizing me thin doesn't work, because I visualize myself thin, but then I keep eating piece of cake. So it's well explained, isn't it? No, I'm joking, but losing an argument or having a stressed morning or something like this, we strive for compensation. We go and buy another pair of shoes. We go now in the internet it's so easy, we don't even have to go out, we just compensate ourselves buying all sorts of things, of gadgets or things like this. There's nothing wrong. I'm not saying, it's not a judgment. I'm just watching. We're just watching. That this, when I say that this sense of identity, we try to keep it with the same density, same reality, same sort of, I can't find for now a better word than density. So if something is taken out, we immediately go to find something else that will, put the same level as before. Try to assimilate, consume, get something that will sort of refurbish our shell as it was before. That it was a few minutes or moments before. And this, our existential crisis in life, when something is taken from us, and it's a big chunk of something quite important, that was something quite important for us, the big challenge is how to find something that will fill the gap, fill the hole, to make us feel again, with, to put the water in the same level as before. So in this sense, and because the Buddhist path is about seeing through all these things, cutting through. And we can say the spiritual materialism is the fact that even spiritual practice, Buddhism or any other practice, can become a form of densifying our sense of existence. When it becomes another form of identity. And then we use actually the Dharma for the wrong purpose. It is supposed to help us see through all of this, get rid of the drama, be able to distinguish the drama from the facts, and just stick with the facts and try to solve the facts and sort of see through, so cut through, not in the sense of violence or anything, but cut through in the sense that we see the drama for what it is, just existential crisis for something that actually doesn't really exist and is supposed to, which only creates trouble. It's the real troublemaker, because that's it's this sense of identity that makes us suffer. Not the problems, not the facts, not the practical aspects, which, as we have seen, are kind of easily solved if we only take care of those. What makes us suffer for months, it's not the fact that I have to take a bus, is the fact that I can't see myself as someone who now comes in the bus instead of in his own car. So who's the real troublemaker here? So if the Buddhism and this path and this habit of investigating, all these tools that we can use to investigate reality and how our mind functions and everything, is supposed to help us see through this. But then, instead of doing that, we use Buddhism as a new ism, as a new identity, as something else that we can adopt, consume, use as a new identity, and for our own, for the benefit of our own sense of existence, of our own sense of identity. And if we do that, and somehow, sometimes we do, we become so, whether it's Buddhism or anything else actually, but in this case it's a little bit more about that. And if we do that, then becoming a Buddhist or becoming anything can be becoming a vegetarian or becoming anything else. Becomes a real sort of we tend to fall into radicalism for one, and then also in intolerance, because then it becomes so much a part of us that if someone else thinks differently or acts differently or says something against what we believe or what we think is right, then we tend to see that as a personal offense or as something that is meant to hurt us or deprive us from something, So, so maybe this doesn't really apply to you, because it's a bit like it probably applies more for people who consider themselves as Buddhists, I would say, and maybe not everybody here.
Or just spiritual.
Or just spiritual, yeah.
Generally.
Yeah. Sometimes I come across people who say, I'm a very spiritual person, and they are very proud of that. Like with the sense of, because I'm a very spiritual person, I'm much better than those who, just want to collect cars and have big houses and things like this. But there's not much difference if we put it like that. Of course, maybe those who have cars and houses and identify themselves through that, maybe they are a bit, how can I say, ruthless. Because they, in their business or in their greed or something like this. But what's the difference? Somehow, you can become very greedy also of other things. It is not because it's material or, money or something like that that is worse than something else. We can also be ruthless in an emotional level or at different levels. It's not just about exploiting people for money. You can exploit people for feelings or for emotions or for, So it's more complex than that. But it's the idea, it's making making things or ideas or ideologies or preferences or qualities, even defaults, even bad qualities, that we have, we tend to be proud of them. Sometimes we hear people saying, I am, what could I say? I have my pride. You know, when people say like this, I have my pride. And when they say that, they're very proud of being proud somehow. You know, they wouldn't be anyway else.
I'm the most humble person you'll ever be.
Exactly. You know, it's so funny. Sometimes when we talk with each other, because I also do the same. But when we talk with each other, and when we start, you know, confessing our faults or confessing our bad qualities or something, as you say. Let's say I am a very impatient person, but when I say it, I don't regret it the least. You know, I'm impatient, and I'm very happy that I'm impatient. I wouldn't be anything else. You know, somehow there is this sense. You know? So everything actually works like this, and our sense of identity, and the one that creates is the real troublemaker, comes from, you know, this image, this quantity of. It's not just one, of course. There's lots of aspects, but all these representations of ourselves and how we cling to that, because that's the only sense of existing that we have. Otherwise, you know, what do we have? We have fleeting thoughts, fleeting emotions. Everything is always in the flow. Everything is always changing. So what can we hold on to as saying, this is me? Now, of course, we have this body, but we also know that, I mean, we have this sense that body is not all we are. Otherwise, we wouldn't say my body. Who is saying my? If the body was all there was, you know, there wouldn't be. I'm not pretending to say that there is something else. What I mean to say is that when we say my body, we are considering that there must be something, someone to whom this body belongs. Otherwise, we wouldn't phrase it like this, would we? But then the strange thing is, we also say my mind. Then who is saying my mind? The body? You know? So if we start analyzing like this, you know, we might be quite surprised that we can't find the owner. You know, the one who says my, where is he? You know, who is it? If it's not the body and if it's not the mind, then who? You know? So when we phrase things, we just phrase them automatically because it's part of the language. But we never question ourselves that by phrasing it in that way, we are assuming. What are we assuming? That there must be someone or something or a principle or something that to whom the body and the mind belongs, and the thoughts and the feelings and the emotions. Everything is mine. You know? So this is an assumption, as all these mental representations of who this sort of mystery man or mystery woman is. And because we have somehow deep down this notion that actually none of this really is truly existence, or is based upon not much, because we can't find it, we can't point it out, we can't put the finger on it. So we are in this constant need for affirmation, and so that's why we keep scanning. We keep scanning things, people, situations, and everything, because it's endless. We never feel comfort enough. You know, the ego will always seek confirmation, always, all the time. You know, either by taking in something else, or pushing something else, something away. You know, these both strategies are equally reinforcing this sense of self that is always in a state of insecurity. the insecurity comes from there. This deep feeling of insecurity that we all have comes from there. Comes from this actually deep feeling of that we are relying on something that is not reliable, and so it constantly needs to be reassured, to be fed, to be to be comforted. Yes. So cutting through the spiritual materialism would mean cutting through this process, actually. Not only that the idea of becoming a Buddhist could also work as a reaffirmation of our own existence, of our own ego, but actually cutting through the process, or helping us see through the process of this constant need for affirmation and start dismantling it a bit, or at least see through it, which is already very important, and perhaps the essential moment is when we understand how all these function. And for instance, things like this famous quote and this famous advice in one of the most famous mind training texts, which are the 8 stanzas of Langri Tangpa or something like this, where they say, give the victory to others and take the defeat upon yourself. This is when we were talking about losing an argument a few moments ago, and the sense that I have lost something, so I have to go and do something to compensate. The problem we always want to have the last word in an argument. Nobody wants to lose, because losing means I will be less existent in the end. My sense of density will be diminished. I will be less dense if I don't say the last word, if I don't have the last word in an argument. So what this is meaning to say is not that out of altruism or maybe just stupidness I should let the other one win, and give him the victory, and and accept the defeat upon myself. The ultimate meaning and the purpose of doing this is just exactly, start to see through the process. See, why do I need to have the last word? What for? Who needs that, actually? And realize that this sense of existing and this constant need for affirmation that will feel a little bit damaged if it doesn't have the last word. And if we are truly practicing the Dharma, and if we have truly understand who is the real troublemaker, who is making us miserable, then we understand this in the correct way. We understand that giving the victory to others means that I accept not to have the last word. And by doing that, I am actually dissolving and seeing through the process of how I create and I sustain and I keep feeding the one who creates me all the problems. The one who is creating all the problems, not only for me, but for everybody else, because when there is conflict, it's always between two egos, Nobody wants to lose. Everybody wants to have the last word. Nobody wants to accept the fact that he might not be, it's not even a question of being right or wrong, it's just a question of winning and not have this sense that something has been taken from us, or now I am a little bit less than I was before I lost the argument. And in order to, and then the idea of revenge eventually, maybe the idea of I have to put it back again, have to make it full again, so I want to do something that will make me the winner, and then I will feel again like like before. I will feel that my density is back, I'm back to my fullest. So cutting through this whole process is actually understanding it. And as you can see, practicing the Dharma is not easy. Right? It won't give us, possibly it won't give us the same satisfaction as a Thai massage or ego massage, perhaps. It will definitely not. It will make us face the hard truth, to understand how it works, and ultimately it will bring us to a state of much more happiness and much less anxiety and things like this. But in the process, might not be extremely comfortable or extremely pleasant. But it is an investment, a long-term investment. It's something that we are doing in order to get rid of the drama, get rid of what is actually creating all our suffering, and get to a more peaceful and get to a more peaceful state, a more confident place where there's not that much anguish, and where we can actually just relax with whatever is happening. And we don't need to be in that state of panic alertness, trying to scan everything to see if are we safe? Am I safe? Is this going to be a threat to me, or is this going to be good for me? We let go a little bit, the grip on that sort of loosens, and we become a little bit more able to live just in a relaxed way, to live in a way that will leave things as they are much more, instead of always assessing them, always panicking about, is this going to be good for me, or is this going to be bad for me? We tend to relax a little bit and be able to just go through things without having to assess them constantly, with this sense of panic, or with this sense of danger.